Hello and welcome back. This is Evan Clementino here from C-B-B, and today we are going to be covering my first video on job costing. Guys, this is what I'm all about here, calculating the profitability of your job so you can be more strategic and make sure the next one is even better. And today we are going to cover the high-level idea of how to calculate your job profitability, what that takes, and you can follow along using my free job profitability tool that you can download with the link in the description. Grab your income statement and have that income statement be broken down over the last 3 months. And you're also going to need your receipts, that are the receipts for expenses that were used on this specific job. That includes your material and your labor. Also the invoice, so how much you priced the job for and how much money you actually made off the job. And we're going to punch this into the job costing tool, and we're going to calculate your profitability on this job. So let's go ahead and get started. This is my job profitability tool here. You'll start by landing on the start here page, and that basically just table of contents breaks down the steps. Step one doesn't have a whole lot to do with the actual project itself. First, we're looking at that profit and loss statement that's broken down by month, and we're looking at the most recent 3 months. What we're doing is calculating the average monthly overhead over these last 3 months to determine how much overhead was used for this specific job. So bear with me here. This here is my profit and loss statement that I asked my accountant for, or that you can ask your accountant for. And I'm just going to screenshot it here just to bring it over to my worksheet. Before we get started punching this in, I'll go back to the P&L for a second, and I'll explain one thing. Likely your vehicle, your truck expenses are going to be a big expense, a big overhead expense in your business. If you're financing your truck, that is, you're making monthly payments, those monthly financing payments will not show up on your P&L. This introduces a conversation on depreciation, which we won't go into. But what I need you to do is first recognize if your vehicle expenses include depreciation. If they don't, then for simplicity's sake, just include a line with the truck payment per month. So in this example, the vehicle expenses do not include depreciation. So these $1,000, $120, $1,250, or $1,500 are just going to be like gas and service, oil changes, whatever. And then you have to include your truck payments as well. So in this example, $750 bi-weekly or $1,500 a month towards truck payments. So that gets included in your overhead. And the first step here is to check your profit and loss statement. What were your total expenses in each of the last 3 months? So let's look for our total expenses right down here at the bottom. The next step here, what were your direct expense totals, aka your COGS, in each of the last 3 months? So we're going to look for the COGS line, the total cost of goods sold, and again, punch that in to our tool. Part two. This is about the direct labor side of things. So again, we're looking at the average over the last 3 months. We want to see what your total cost of payroll was for direct labor. These are the employees that work on site, boots on the ground, getting the job done. And you can see that here as direct labor over the last 3 months, $9,600 for each month. And how many hours did employees work on site in these 3 months? So for this company, we're just going to estimate it here. We have 2 employees that each work full-time. Okay. So that's going to be 2 times 40 hours a week times 4 weeks per month, 320 hours per month. Now let's get into the project specific information here. How many direct labor hours have been worked on this project so far? I'm going to jump over to the receipts just because I have that information there. We can see that you have 2 employees. 1 employee worked for 5 days and 1 employee worked for 4 days. So our total labor hours for that was 5 days times 8 hours per day, plus 4 days times 8 hours per day, for a total of 72 hours. So let's go back to our tool, punch in 72 hours. There you go. If you already have your average monthly overhead, you can just punch it into this cell and you can skip this whole step. But for the sake of this example, we're doing it all. So that's step one, calculating your average monthly overhead. And you can see here that in step 2, our average monthly overhead is broken down here. So this is all automatic. This basically took the information from the last page and plugged it in here. And then this calculated your monthly overhead, your average monthly overhead over those 3 months. This is your average monthly direct labor hours over those 3 months. And this divides the previous two. It divides your average monthly overhead by the average labor hours to determine how much, on average, how much overhead is spent per direct labor hour. So for this company, every hour that an employee works incurs $47.27 in overhead. It's a nice simple metric that you can use when you're pricing your jobs, and we'll cover that in a second. For this project, we determined that 47.27 per hour times 72 hours equals $3,400 of overhead that can be attributable to this job. There's your overhead, done. Next, we're going to cover the receipts. These are the direct expenses, the literal expenses that went into providing this service. And I have these expenses here. If you have a box of receipts, you've given your receipts to the accountant, maybe they even categorize it by job for you. Grab these receipts, just the ones for this job, make an extensive list of these, and we're going to plug it into the tool. You can see here I have materials, I have subcontractor expenses, my labor expenses, including the basic wage, plus the additional payroll expenses that I incur, such as CPP, EI, and WSIB. And then the income. So I earned 2 checks of $8,000, total $16,000 for the project. So let's cover that, or let's plug these in. Oh. So our receipts are loaded in here. You can see I've done everything from materials, subcontractors, labor expenses, and our income for the project. Now let me erase these receipts out of here, and you will see our project totals. But before I do that, let's talk about a couple questions that you might have. The first one here is of your owner's salary. You may be wondering, do I include that? Do I not? Well, you have to look back at your profit and loss statement. Is your owner's salary included as overhead, or is it included as direct labor? Because if it's included as direct labor, then yes, you need to list it as part of your receipts. But likely as the owner's salary, since you're jumping around from job to job, if you don't track your specific hours for the jobs that you work, then it probably falls under your owner's salary in your overhead expenses. So you don't need to include that in the receipts if that's the case. The next one here, your general supplies. So this is where it's important to know how your bookkeeper operates and how they categorize your expenses. Realistically, direct materials should be things like this that are directly used in that job. Things like X-Acto knife blades or saw blades, those get used over all these jobs, and so they should be categorized as overhead instead of direct material expenses. Every business is going to be different, but for the sake of this example, that's how I'm treating these categorizations. And then your other expenses, like just know generally, okay, I used this specific product or this expense on this job. Is that something that I need to include in this list as a direct material expense, or is it something that's already included in my overhead? Here is your totals for the project. So your income is 16 grand. This is just literally taking the totals from the categories listed here. So your total is 16 grand. Labor costs you 2.4 grand. Materials cost you 3.9, and subcontractors cost you 2 grand. In total, your direct expenses or your COGS costed you 8.3 grand. And your overhead, as we determined before, was 3.4 grand. So let's go to the results here. Step 3, automatically generated for you. Green means good. We can see that for this project. Again, like I said, you made 16 grand. Here's where you spent it on. Your profit, 4.2 grand. When you break it down into a percentage factor, you have your direct expenses equaling 52%, and you have your overhead equaling another 21% of revenue. What's left over, 27%, that's your net profit. That's what you take home after all of your expenses, direct and indirect, are considered. Guys, it might seem complicated, but really it's as simple as that. Once you collect the receipts, and once you collect the receipts, and once you determine what your average monthly overhead is and you apply that to the job, you can come up with a true value of profitability over the internet, there's going to be tons of different ways to do that. This is just one way. And in general, this is a way that allows for you to determine your profitability without putting in too much effort for the number crunching. Simply grab those receipts, come up with a general idea of what your average monthly overhead is and apply it to the job, and you will find a profitability metric that you can then act on. Now, speaking of acting on that profitability metric, I'm going to leave that for our next video here. Like I said, I'm going to be doing a ton of videos on job costing. And the next one I do is going to cover how to look at those results and the thought process around improving those results on the next project. So stay tuned for that. Subscribe to the channel and you'll see all my updates for new videos, whether that's on income statements or on job profitability or just more conversational pieces on construction financials. Follow along so that you can unlock and reach those growth milestones where the answers are buried right in the numbers of your business. Like, subscribe, follow me on Instagram at Clementino3B, or otherwise shoot me a message through email, contact my direct line. You can check out my website, clementino.ca. I'm everywhere, guys. Shoot me a follow, connect with me. I'm happy to chat, and I will continue to produce these free resources for you guys to maximize your business and skyrocket your growth. Until next time, cheers.